This is a lesson for 16-2. What you're doing today is that you are choosing the correct type of regression. So you have to, again, identify the type of regression, whether it is linear, quadratic, or exponential. All right, remember that linear regressions form a straight line. Quadratic regressions form a U shape like a parabola, and exponentials are curved. The very first thing that you need to make sure that you do, take a look at your calculator, is turn on your stat diagnostics. If your stat diagnostics are not turned on, you won't be able to do the lesson today. So you have to make sure that your stat diagnostics are turned on. So go to mode, go all the way down to stat diagnostics, and make sure that your stat diagnostics are turned on. Remember, anytime that you reset the calculator, always have to make sure that you go back and turn it on because the default setting is off. So remember from yesterday, you're going to have to type in values into your L1 and your L2. And then to find out the linear regression, quadratic regression, exponential, remember you got to go to stat calc, number 4, number 5, or 0 for linear, quadratic, and exponential. You're going to write the equation. Again, we're going to write the equation rounding to the nearest hundredth, and you're going to find your R value, and you're going to find your R value to the first 4 place values. Remember that an R1, R equals 1, indicates a really strong positive correlation. An R value really close to -1 is a strong negative correlation. That's very important for today. So what you're going to have, there are 2 different types of questions. Here's the first type of question. It says, determine what kinds, not kids, determine what kinds of regression a set of data is by comparing R values. What you're going to compare is you're going to compare an R to an R or an R squared to an R squared. The one that is closest to either R equals 1 or R equals -1 is the type of regression. All right. So when you figure out your R values, we're going to have to do one for linear, for quadratic, and for exponential. Whichever one is closest to either 1 or -1, that is the type of regression that it is. Let's graph these points first. On your homework today, you're not going to have to graph anything. All right. But you will have to look at pictures of graphs. These numbers go all the way up to 900. So I'm just going to count by 100s going up. So our first point is 0, 900. So I'm going to go over to 0, up to 900, and I'm going to put a dot. 1 and 880. 1 and 880 would be approximately right there. 2 and 830, approximately right there. 3 and 750. 4 and 650. 5 and 500. So when you take a look at this picture of this graph, you can't tell, all right? You can't tell if it's really a line, if it's a parabola. It sort of looks like it might be parabola-ish shaped, or an exponential curve, just a single curve. You really can't tell exactly what's going on here. So what we're going to do is we need to type these values into our L1 and our L2. So go to Stat, Edit. In our L1, we have 0 through 5. So we're just going to put in 0 through 5 into our L1. And then in our L2, we're going to type in the feet. So we're going to have 900, 880, 830, 750, 650, and 500. Again, always make sure that your data is typed in correctly, because if you have even one number wrong, it's going to totally mess everything up. So we have to do to this data, we have to do all 3 different types of regressions and find the R and the R squared. So we're going to go to Stat Calc, and we're going to do our linear regression first. So we're going to go down to number 4 and hit enter. we want L1 and L2, so we're going to go down to calculate. So when we take a look at this, all right, when we take a look at this for linear, for our R value is negative 0.9626. I'm just going to write down the first 4 place values. You don't have to round with the R values today, all right? I'm just going to type in the first 4 numbers. Whatever the first 4 numbers in our R value is, that's what I'm going to write. For the R squared, now you might be saying, wait, why do I have to write the R squared if we're looking at linear? That's because when we compare things, we have to compare R to R and R to R squared. So when we want to figure out if it's linear, quadratic, or exponential, we have to look at those R squared values. So this is 0.9626, or sorry, 9666, 9266, sorry. For quadratic, go to Stat Calc. This time we're going to go down to number 5 for quadratic regression. And we want L1 and L2. And with quadratic regressions, you only have an R squared value. So I'm going to write down 0.9994. For exponential, I'm going to go to Stat Calc, go down to 0, and then go down to calculate. So for exponential, our R value is negative 0.9400. For R squared, it is 0.8837. Now that you have these 5 values here, you want the one that is closest to 1 or negative 1. So what number here out of these 5 is closest to 1 or negative 1? Well, they all start with 0.9, except for this last one. That one's definitely out. And then we have a 0.96, 92, 99, and 94. Well, the 99 is the closest. So this has to be quadratic. All right, this has to be quadratic because that is the number that is closest to 1 or negative 1 for your equation. Now, when you go to write your equation, you're going to have to go back when it's because I'm on exponential right now. You see the EXP in the calculator. I got to go back to quadratic because I need to write the quadratic equation. So Stat Calc, I got to go back to number 5, which is the quadratic equation, regression rather. And now I got to write this one. I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth again. So Y equals. Notice that if you forget what the quadratic looks like, notice that they put it at the top here, AX squared. So I'm going to have negative 15.18 when I round to the nearest hundredth, X squared. Now I have plus BX. So this is actually going to be minus 3.25X. It's minus because it's a negative as my B here, X, and then plus C. So plus 898. And I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth, so 898.93. So that's the process that you're going to have to go through for this type of question, all right? Do your linear regression, your quadratic regression, your exponential regression, all for the same data. Figure out which one is closest to 1 or negative 1, choose that one, and do the regression equation for that one. Take a look at this one. So same exact type of question. So the first thing that I want to do is go back to my L1 and L2 and type in this data. Again, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I don't need to change my L1 at all, but my L2, I definitely need to change. So I'm going to be typing in 6, 8, 12, 17, 26, and 40. Again, always make sure that your data is correct before you move on. If we are going to graph this one, those of you in person, you don't need to graph it. You could just look at mine and sort of sketch it. When we go to graph this one, it's, again, hard to tell what exactly is going on when you take a look at this graph. All right, we have 0 and 6. We have 1 and 8, 2 and 12, 3 and 17, 4 and 26, 5 and 40. it looks like it's a single curve, all right, but it might be quadratic. It might be part of a parabola. You don't know that. It might be a straight line, all right? I could draw a straight line, all right? I could draw a straight line that's very close to that. You never know what exactly it is just based from the picture. That's why we have to look at the R values. So now we're going to go to stat calc. We're going to do number 4 first, linear regression, to find our R and our R squared. So our R value is 0.9507. Again, we're not rounding at all. Our R squared is 0.9038. Go to quadratics. So we're going to go to stat calc, number 5 this time for quadratics. And doing the quadratic regression, our R squared value is 0.9957. That's really, really close to 1. Then we're going to try our exponential. So stat calc, we're going to go to 0, which is the exponential regression. And for R is 0.9982. That's really close to 1. And 0.9964. So now that we have the 5 numbers there, we want to know which one is closest to 1 or -1. So the one that's closest is the exponential, 0.9982. So this is definitely exponential. For the equation, we're on the exponential as it is right now. So we're just going to do y equals. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth again. So a times b to the x power. So a is 5.67 times your b value, 1.47, to the x power. So that is our regression equation. So that's one type of question that you're going to have. All right. The other type of question that you're going to have will have the graphs already there for you. All right. This is actually a scatter plot. All right. This is actually a scatter plot. And so these dots, there's not 2 separate things there. They want to know which of these 2 lines fits the data better. That's what they want to know. They want to know which one of the 2 lines fits the data better. These are the equations of the 2 lines. All right. These are the equations of the 2 lines. And they just want to know which one fits it better. All right. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out the coordinates of the points that are on the scatter plot. All right. This is just one scatter plot. They do 2 different things. You have the quadratic, which is the parabola, and you have the exponential, which is the single curve. And they want to know which one fits the data better. So you have to identify your coordinates. Remember that when you write down coordinates, because that's what we're going to type into our stat edit, we're going to type in the coordinates. When we go to type in the coordinates, your first number is your x value, how many you go over. Your second number is your y value, which is how many you go up. All right. So this point right here, all right, this point right here is over to 5 up to 1. So 5, 1 is one of our coordinates. This point is 10, 1. So 10, 1 is one of our coordinates. 15, 2, I see a dot at. I see a dot at 20, 2. I see a dot at 25, 3. I see a dot at 30, 4. I see a dot at 35, 6. And I see a dot at 40, 8. So these are the 8 things that I'm going to type into my L1 and my L2. So I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40. And then for my L2 column, which is my Y values, I have 1, 1. I have 2, 2. I have 3 and 4. and I have 6 and 8. So these are just the coordinates of the points that are on there. All right, these are just the coordinates of the points that are on the graph. So now you're going to go through that same exact process that we just did. Stat calc. You're going to do we're not going to do linear here. Your only choices are quadratic or exponential. So we don't have to do number 4. We're just going to go right down to number 5, the quadratic. And our R squared value is 0.989. Just going to write down the first 4 numbers. Stat calc. And we're going to go to 0 for the exponential regression. And write in our R and our R squared. So our R is 0.9869 and our R squared is 0.9740. And we want to know which one is closest to, did I screw up somewhere? I have something different on my, I have something different on my notes. So anyway, according to this, it looks like the quadratic is the best fit of the data. All right, that actually makes more sense than what I have on my sheet of paper. The quadratic is the closest one to 1 because we have 989 rather than 986. So this is the closest one to 1, so it has to be quadratic. I'm going to have to fix this one. Oh, yeah, no, that's right. That is definitely right. And one more, if you take a look at the other side of the piece of paper, the last one here, doing the same thing, all right? We have to identify our coordinates first. Our first one is over to 10 up to 50. Our next one is over to 20 up to 200. We have 30 and 300. 40 and 250. We have 50 and 150. We have 60 and 100. I think it helps to write all these down first rather than typing them in as you go. 70 and 50. And that's it. So this one, we only have 7 of them. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And we're deleting this one. For our L2, we're going to type in our Y values. So for our Y values, we have 50, 200, 300, 250, 150, 100, and 50. And we don't need that, 8. So those are my coordinates of the points that are on the graph. So now I'm going to go to stat and edit. Stat and calc. I'm only choosing between quadratic and exponential. So I'm going to go down to quadratic. And for my R squared, I have 0.7895. For exponential, stat calc, number 0. And I have negative 0.2187. And for my R squared, I have 0.0478. So which one is closest to 1 or negative 1? It would be the 0.7895. So this is quadratic. And that's what you're going to have to do for all right? Just make sure that you do your points correctly. Don't accidentally skip over one. All right. You have to type them in exactly how they are.